Welcome back to the Wrestling Roundtable. Will Brooks rejoins our panel, and we're going to move on to the New World Order. But first, speaking of New World Order, we think of the nWo shirts. We want you to get the Wrestling Roundtable t-shirt. That's available at our store at WrestlingRoundtable.com. And if you want to get anything on Amazon.com, get it through our Amazon store first, please, and we'll get a cut of it. A little one, thanks Amazon, but a cut nonetheless. So do all your holiday shopping. That's coming up through our Amazon store. So, we just talked about the boom period in wrestling that we're still waiting on after all these years, I think post-invasion really. But what really started the 90s boom for wrestling, the Monday Night War, was really sparked, I think. Of course, we know about Tyson and the Attitude Era and whatever, but what really kicked the WWF into gear was the nWo on the other channel in WCW. Now, the Legends of Wrestling show, and it's Legends of Wrestling, not Legends of Wrestling Roundtable. We are the Wrestling Roundtable. But Legends of Wrestling just had a show with Kevin Nash on it, WWE legend, who talked about the nWo. And as usual with that show, I think it's pretty good up to about midway, and then the bullshit started. Now, we can get into the details of specifics, but not just yet. I want to give an overview of the nWo because we do have a lot of younger fans who have tuned into the show, not just fans like us who lived through it. So the younger fans who are watching wrestling now, who were born, I think, after a year with a 19 at the beginning, which still blows my mind, the nWo was really predicated on the idea of an invasion. Everyone always talks about, oh, TNA should invade now or whatever. All these other fucking invasions, ECW and everything. This was the invasion that set the standard. Now, maybe it wasn't original. UWFI and New Japan did it first, whatever. But Bischoff brought it to America and put this great spin on it. He used this propaganda that the WWF had growing up. We're number one, WCW sucks, for the WCW audience. All of a sudden, here's Scott Hall essentially doing Razor Ramon, Nash doing Diesel, and the biggest name ever in wrestling, WWF name too, Hulk Hogan, turned heel after all these years of being the top babyface. That's what really sparked it. It made WWF fans, like probably you guys who were only watching then, flip the channel to see, holy shit, what's going on? And of course, introduce the fans to everything else they had, like cruiserweights and other wrestlers and whatever, and that's what really made WCW hot. Of course, over the next couple years, it got really diluted. Multiple different factions, so many people joining, going back to the well so many times, and then of course WWF buys WCW, so therefore buys their assets and had their own little version of the nWo very briefly. So that's how the nWo went. But what made it really so legendary in the world of wrestling?
The reality of it, as a fan, it was really before you knew that if someone left WWF that they were going automatically to the competition. You didn't know when. It really came out of nowhere, and you really had the real-life storyline of the Monday Night Wars. These two wrestling companies going head-to-head, taking pot shots at each other.
Jim Crockett and NWA and the WWF rivalry went back way before any show was on Monday night, too.
Yeah, so this was built up over decades and decades, and it was done so differently. Scott Hall coming out of the audience, not really saying what was going on, so they give you a little bit, but they still kept you hungry. And it really gave the WCW programming a whole new edge. Everybody felt on edge. Everyone was coming together to stop these outside forces, and everyone really recognized Hall and Nash because they're such big stars during the New Generation era, and now that they're on the same side, and you really thought that McMahon was sending these guys down, and you're like, what's going on? And then the Hogan thing, on top of that, he was off TV for a few months, didn't really expect him to be there, and then he dropped that leg, and it was just like, wow, wait, Hogan turned real. Wow, wait, he's with Hall and Nash. Wow, wait, they're from this way. What? He's cutting a heel promo, and he's so good at it, so natural.
And then every week it was something more like, wow, Six is there too, or 1-2-3 Kid. Yeah. Wow, Giant just joined. Wow, it was just nonstop stuff, and the storytelling was off the charts.
It was the reality of it, the execution of it was something that I was saying before we started taping, something that we will never see, our grandkids will never see in their lifetime.
Don't you think it was brilliant in the sense that they took this real-life rivalry of the North versus the South and turned it into their own show, the nWo versus WCW? They pretty much represented the WWF at first, and that led to a lawsuit, we know, and then they kind of segued in their own way to like, oh, we were here before as the Diamond Stud and Oz or whatever, and we were not treated well, and Hogan had that great motivation. You guys booed me since I showed up, which was true. So what do you think worked about the nWo?
Like he was saying, it felt legitimate. It really felt like when Nash came out in the crowd, it was like, what the hell's he doing there? Wasn't he just on TV like a month ago on WF? When you bought it Nash, you're like, whoa, what the fuck? He was just champion, wasn't he? Like
one after another.
Exactly. Then I think the best part is when like after you drop that leg drop and you get that pin, they started throwing trash in the ring. People were like, yo, fuck WAF, man. That's what I felt like they were doing. Like, yo, screw that.
As much credit as you give to the wrestlers, you have to give just as much credit to the commentators, especially Bobby Heenan, because the way he sold Hogan, being like he was like, I told you guys for years that this guy was no good, and here he is trying to put my job and my life in jeopardy.
Hulk Hogan, you can go to hell. But I think it also worked on a psychological level too. Not just in the storytelling, because we were saying week after week, they didn't blow it after a week.
No.
This was great episodic storytelling that unfolded over months and involved so many different people. But in a psychological level too, if you realize now how wrestling is, where it's set up like I'm Raw, where I wear a red shirt, and if I take it off, I'm wearing a blue shirt. All that shit started because of the NWO. Yeah. It was the black and white, the colors meant something. It had a lot of gang mentality and themes in that.
Promos.
So promos, how about those video packages they did?
Some of the video packages they did were just phenomenally done. I mean, again, Eric Bischoff explained it perfectly that he was trying to create two different cultures in one company. And he created the old-fashioned mentality to the new age of
the tradition of Flair and Piper and NWA.
To what the NWO represented, which was all new, innovative ideas. And by taking a group that states that Vince McMahon was bringing them over, paying them off to destroy their company, but meanwhile gain their viewer audience, it was well done. It's something that in someone's head, how did they ever just say, you know what, why don't we just do this? How can that just happen? Eric Bischoff, Hulk Hogan got together, they got something really smart out of it, and it benefited every single fan because we bought into the idea of the NWO.
To the point where when they said Vince is here, which ended up being Virgil, we were like, no way. No way. but the,
Vincent.
But the details really mattered.
Yes.
Because as much as people say fans don't pay attention or have a short attention span or short memory, bullshit. When you have continuity, like Heenan always ripped on Hogan for decades and then brought that up. When you have attention to detail, where even the merchandise catalogs, you remember the merchandise catalog for NWO, or even the label on the shirt, no copyright Turner or WCW or anything was even on that. The details counted. But eventually something, or many things, went sour, which is what happened with the NWO. So what do you think led to its downfall? Was it oversaturated? Did they do it too much? Or, I think this is an important thing, there have been about 4.5 different versions of the NWO outside of Vince McMahon ending it in July of 2002 in East Rutherford, New Jersey, which sucked. There was never an official ending for an NWO. So do you think that played a part in it?
Yeah, I think that Starrcade 97 was a big part of that too. But the fact that Hogan was champion for so long and barely defended it, I think that had a big part of it. I think it was just some of...
I don't agree with that one.
I think him losing the title to Luger on TV and then getting it back a week later hurt it. I just think there was just so many versions that just let almost anybody. I mean, I liked when it was like an elite group with like Six and even Vince and Hogan, Nash, the Giant. And you have all these guys taking over all the forces. And another thing that made it unique, too, is that heels and faces were banding together to go against the NWO.
That was the first time anybody had done that either.
I think that it had a lot to do with egos. Egos really got in the way of this entire storyline. They started thinking more about themselves and about what the actual NWO storyline could do for the company. So when you get your ego involved and you get booking privileges and you get money, guaranteed money, where these other people who have been very loyal to WCW for more years than they have get the hot shot or thrown out of the way. It really, if you were not in the NWO, you just were not going to get over. And that's
not true.
I don't know.
Only one person did that, but NWO.
Who?
Goldberg.
No.
DDP.
Jericho got way over as a heel in the mid-card in 98. It had nothing to do with that.
Not to the level that...
Benoit
but they all left. And why? Because egos got involved.
I don't know if NWO had anything to do with that.
I think it did. I think because all the guys who were in the NWO were the ones that had the egos and had all the power.
Well, you know what a big problem with that is as far as creative control and egos? I don't think they ever had an end game or an end point in mind. So when you have
beginning, middle, and end.
So many T-shirts being sold by the NWO and whatever, they were the cool heels.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the baby faces like Luger and DDP and DDP's like the only one who ever really looked great consistently. There was never that big victory. I mean, Sting was hugely over, but
Goldberg was a perfect example where that could have maybe ended it. I mean, when Goldberg was getting built up and he beat Hogan, why not end it right there? Why not just NWO done. Goldberg's the only
They
guy
could have done that at Starrcade 97 with
Exactly.
Sting, but-
Yes, they could have because they built that up for so long. That's where it really started going sour because no one beat the NWO.
Do you really want to end it on a Nitro though? I mean, something like that's lasted that long. That was the biggest angle.
Well, that's a whole other issue.
That's a whole
but
other
let's
issue.
see what you think about why the NWO had a downfall, and then we're going to go to a
because it lasted 5 years. No angle's supposed to last over a year tops, 2 years, if that. But 5 years.
It had legs for a good 2.
Yeah, no, I could 2 years because it was still good. But yeah, you have to blow it off eventually and have them guys implode. Basically, you know, and it looked like they were doing that too. But then when they got the Wolfpack and the black and white, maybe you thought maybe this is okay. We can.
Yeah, I feel like they could have had more freshness to it after a while.
Well, we're going to cover the Wolfpack when we come back, though. Don't turn your back on the Wolfpack. We're going to have to for just a few breaks. So we'll be right back.
Marty.
Yes, Colt.
When I think of fun,
Yes.
I think of a couple things.
All right.
Mini golf,
Yeah.
paying my taxes,
What?
and a road trip.
That's a good one.
I say we take a road trip.
Where do you want to go?
You take this imaginary steering wheel.
Well, we can go to Los Angeles, California.
No, I don't want to go
New York
there.
City.
Nah, that's way too big.
Wait a second. You want to go to Cleveland?
Do you think they'd let us in?
Only if we brought the best wrestling they've ever seen.
Well, let's get rid of these steering wheels and let's go to Cleveland. $5 wrestling on the road. We're going out of North Carolina. North Carolina, you can't have all the great wrestling. We got to share around and spread some love. Let's go to Cleveland, Ohio, and bring $5 wrestling to the great state of
now,
Ohio.
do you think they have wrestlers in Cleveland that will really embody the $5 wrestling brand?
I'm hoping so. You know what? I'm guaranteeing it. You know, we got all these stars. These guys are getting these big heads. Dynamite thinks he's this big, giant star. Well, hey, there's some competition on your heels.
Absolutely.
And they don't live in North Carolina. They live all over the country. Maybe eventually all over the world will get it. But for now, $5 wrestling's coming to Cleveland, Ohio.
Don't forget to introduce Fuckface over here.
Oh, yes.
The new theme song.
I'm being Zack Ryder for Halloween.
I'm John Cena.
Everyone ready?
Everyone
ready?
I'm recording.
Let's get it on.
Hit the record button.
Yes, please. Welcome back to the Wrestling Roundtable. We are welcoming back Midge, Brett Simonello, and before we move on to the rest of the NWO talk, join us on all our social networking sites. You can get the links at WrestlingRoundtable.com. We have 2 Facebook pages, fan page and a group page. We are on Twitter. We are on iTunes and Blog Talk Radio. You can get our entire archives in audio form on those 2 sites. And let's not forget Go Fight Live for complete episodes of not just this show, but the radio show too. So we are all over the place, and we want to hear from you for our next Q&A coming up, Submission Round 5. Except we want you to send in videos. I don't care if it's on your webcam and you make it a YouTube response. If you want to send the file to WrestlingRoundtable@gmail.com. Either way, let's see your face. Join the roundtable for our next Q&A. Just be sure to include your first name and location and make the question good. We will be doing the submission round number 5 coming up. But right now we're doing the NWO, and we just mentioned the Wolfpack right at the end. And before we get on to the real split of the NWO, the original split that they were going to do, which was actually the real brand split that we talk about Raw and SmackDown, well, Bischoff had that idea first with Thunder when AOL Time Warner said we want another show on Thursday nights. The idea initially was to make that the WCW show and Nitro the NWO show. If you remember the WCW/NWO logo, like on Revenge on N64, that was the idea in '98. After the bad response that the first NWO Nitro had when they were tearing down the set and it took forever, they abandoned that idea. Even with the roster they had, hundreds of great wrestlers and all these huge names, they didn't do the brand split. Do you think they made the right choice?
Well, they're out of business now, so I guess I'm going to go ahead and say no on that one. It probably could have worked.
I think they did. I think with the NWO promotion, people will be confused as to, wait, are we supposed to cheer for these guys now? Because you remember, the first NWO sold out, all NWO pay-per-view. NWO was supposed to be like the heroes, but people were a little bit confused. They're still booing them, and then they're cheering Jericho, but then they're booing the Giant in the main event against Hogan. So as a fan, I really didn't know how to think.
I think them keeping one brand was a good choice because just the whole idea of the NWO is different than Raw and SmackDown. It's a heel group, it's a faction, it's a different sort of concept. But at the same time, we've been constantly complaining about the brand split for the most part ever since. So even though that's kind of on its last legs right now, we've seen WWE and how they've done it, which hasn't been exactly right either. So I don't know what I'm trying to say. What are you trying to say, Will?
Well, with the, so when I looked at the N64 game when I was playing, where they had the whole nWo arena and everything like that, that looks cool as in a video game aspect. It's like, what if that really happened? But when you really look at the real picture of it, it doesn't work. A heel faction can't have its own show because again, to your points, who do you cheer? Who's the hero? Who's the bad guy? That's what wrestling is.
They're still gonna have
there's a
WCW
face
guys in
and
there.
there's a heel. Without WCW being there, nWo means absolutely nothing. nWo needed WCW like WCW needed nWo.
And that's why I think the Wolfpack at its core never really worked. I guess what I'm trying to say is maybe Bischoff for once made the right choice about not doing a brand split. Maybe Vince
it's
should
good
have
for
followed
once in a
but-
while. Like the NWO sold out idea, I thought was a really good concept, but their own pay-per-view, that's fine. One Nitro, maybe like once in a while they take over.
Right.
That's fine, but not as a permanent solution.
Now,
No.
the Wolfpack, as we mentioned, of course, they split the NWO. They had teased it a year before with Hogan and Nash, but it took another year with Savage and everything for them to actually do it. The difference, of course, is their baby faces in red NWO. And the reason I never really liked it is because when Luger joined it, and Sting especially joined it, how can you have Sting wearing an NWO shirt? NWO was supposed to be anti-WCW. This completely did not work, and I did not buy for a second the guy who was in the rafters for a year and a half not talking is dancing around in red face paint the next month either. However, it did sell a shitload of t-shirts, and we saw how over Nash was even when he beat Goldberg, which shouldn't have happened. That got a huge pop. So do you think that the Wolfpack was a bad idea, or was it, you thought it was realistic, you said on the show once, and I thought that was absurd, but...
Realistic?
That's what you said.
Wolfpack?
That's what you
No.
said.
But we gotta go
I
back
want
to
to see the archive.
Go to
we gotta
iTunes.
go.
I will.
Go to
I
iTunes.
will.
He said it.
I don't think I said that.
And we're having Nash and Hogan feuding, or teasing a feud. That is a big mark against that being a great faction.
It also adds
The original
realism.
three.
It also adds realism.
Don't make excuses.
It also adds realism.
Thank you.
Well, what do you think now? You might have changed your mind.
To sell a lot of t-shirts and get kids in it, yes, but as far as what the NWO stood for and what it was meant to become, I don't think it was the greatest idea. I think the NWO, that part of the NWO was, I think, mainly just against Hogan. Still against WCW, but against Hogan. And I feel like that's still a little too much what to do.
I don't know. They were still hanging around with baby faces and shit. Like they were.
Yeah, that's when it started to blow around. It's like, well, I mean, why? If they're against Hogan, is the enemy of your enemy your friend now? I mean, it just really blurred the lines, and it really was like just making them.
What I look at is, did they really need the NWO logo on the Wolfpack itself? Because what if the Wolfpack was on its own? What if it just said, we're the Wolfpack, we're just a group of guys that's going to make sure this group goes down? We're not going to have the NWO name attached to it. They did that NWO because, of course, it's a merchandiser. It's all about selling merch.
Which is what it did.
What it did, but what if they just didn't have the NWO on it and they just called themselves the Wolfpack?
It wouldn't have been as cool.
Well, how do you? But it's the same music, same thing coming out. They
No,
didn't
they
ever
had
really
that
call
new-
themselves the NWO Wolfpack. They call themselves
They
just the
had better
Wolfpack.
music.
They
But-
had the rap.
No,
It
they-
was a
They
little
got
different.
Conan over.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it did help Conan. It also helped Nash establish himself as the leader of that group and show that Nash can really be a top guy, like he used to be when he was Diesel. So I like the idea of it, but I think that, again, if you're calling yourself the NWO, you're supposed to be anti-establishment against the WCW, and they weren't like that. And especially like your point with Luger and Sting joining, it didn't make sense. And then Macho and Sting kind of like fading away, where like Sting was really messing with Bret Hart, not really worrying about the Wolfpack. It was really Nash who really represented just that whole thing. He ran with it.
Well, the show that you don't remember was a couple years ago in our first season when we talked about the best and worst factions. And Lawrence was arguing that Four Horsemen was the best faction. I was arguing the NWO because of the impact it had on wrestling. Now, when it comes to wrestling, Lawrence could have easily won that argument if he said the Horsemen had better matches, because what are we really going to say? But he didn't say that. And if you listen back to the archives on iTunes, you can hear that conversation. But this is about NWO specifically, and when it comes to matches, one of the most infamous matches, if you want to call it that, speaking of the Wolfpack, is the Fingerpoke of Doom in January '99 when the NWO Elite came together and they pretty much ended that Wolfpack experiment. And now it was the elite group of the NWO, which got joined by Luger, and the black and white B team underneath it. It's been said that this is the time that WCW really lost and it killed WCW. And I think, as we said in our first teaser for the Roundtable a couple of years ago, if you really think the finger poke killed WCW, you're completely fucking wrong. In fact, the rating was the exact same the next week, and the ratings didn't even start slipping until a couple months later. Now, the reason I bring it up is because Nash has been constantly saying this just utterly factually wrong bullshit.
Do you think that the one finger finish with Hogan was a good idea?
Would have been if Bill wouldn't have fucking put his hand through a limo a couple weeks later because he got all pissed off because Scott said something on TV. And he would have done it. He would have mowed through all of us to finally get to Hogan, beat Hogan, get the strap, get another run. You know, we had 7 months of television planned right there. And he lost his head and put his fist through a window.
The problem is that didn't happen. He says Goldberg messed it up because he put his arm through a window. That was December 99. This happened in January 99. And they even undo themselves when they show the clips, because all of a sudden the Goldberg that they show is chasing Jeff Jarrett and Bret Hart and that NWO 2000. Wrong NWO formation in 99, Nash. So that being said, is the Fingerpoke of Doom, because it's so infamous now, the real end of WCW, as everyone says?
No, not at all. I think that it'll start in 97 because I think that just really just put a strong break to the halt that was WCW. I think even then, yes, they kind of not recovered fully.
They didn't, but they did go on to have their most profitable year ever in 98.
Yeah, 98 was still, even with Tyson and the rise of the Attitude Era,
which showed that wrestling could do no wrong that year.
Yeah, with Wolfpack, with the rise of Goldberg, they were still doing very well. But they did not have the kind of hype, the kind of motivation, the kind of driving factor as far as like trying to bring Raw's ratings down like they did in 96 and 97.
They gave away Foley's victory that night, so I don't think you could say that.
One quote is it what they had because compared to what they were doing in 96.
I look at 97 it's like a teaser almost. Like they allowed Sting to win the belt finally after all that build-up. Although
they stripped him immediately.
They stripped him, and you know that which killed that. The Fingerpoke of Doom represented to me was a way to again try to reevaluate the NWO scenario. Goldberg was getting so hot, and again, I go back to the Eagle thing from the first show, is that you allowed Goldberg, who was their biggest face of all, probably of all time of that company, get demolished in that ring on that Nitro. So you brought all those egos together, Luger joining, which made absolutely no sense and had no...
Luger turned on everybody at some point, though.
You know, it was very hard because it just doesn't make any sense why they did it.
It can, but let's get into that. Let's do fucking another third segment. Why not? We got more to talk about, so we'll be right back. All right, welcome back. We don't have as much time as I thought, so you were saying the finger poke didn't make sense. I think the thing is, a lot of times WCW didn't beat you over the head with their storylines. They didn't spell everything out for you with exposition. So if they had made it a little more obvious, maybe it was Nash cheated. That's what people always forget with the Taser and Bam Bam Bigelow and Disco Inferno and all the other run-ins at Starrcade to get the belt off of Goldberg and hand it back to Hogan because Hogan couldn't do it himself. He couldn't beat Goldberg. If they had made that a little more obvious, I think it would have been a little better. But they also clearly did not have an end game in mind. No. Even if Goldberg was going to go through everybody, he did get the win back against Nash at Spring Stampede a couple months later. But by that time, not only did Hogan have knee surgery, he was already doing the double turn with Flair, and they were switching heel and face, which made no sense. So I don't think that really was what they're going to do exactly. But Fingerpoke of Doom. Do you think it really was the end of WCW?
No, the end of WCW was David Arquette, Jeff Jarrett, Vince Russo. Russo tried to be a real NWO. He came in and he succeeded.
David Arquette happened like years after they had already been losing the war.
They were done. Look, the real end of WCW was Vince McMahon is the better man. The North won the championship once again.
North always wins.
North, and that's it.
You should really start kissing his ass when he's paying you, but...
He's trying to get paid now.
I don't think it is, because I feel like that's part of their character. That's Nash and Hogan's character. It's not like Goldberg beat Nash, and then that happened with Hogan and Goldberg turning heel. That'd be a whole different story. This is not something out of Nash's character. This is something that NWO would do, and the fact that like it involved like Steiner, I mean Luger, yeah, whatever, but combining the best of the Black and White and Wolfpack, and ending the split bullshit, I would rather see that.
Hey, people were talking about it the next day, and we're still talking about it.
It's an important factor on wrestling in general, that whole thing, because it shows that the NWO is such a really cool group of people that could fool everybody, and that's what made it really great. There's a good and bad to it all, but I think the good part is it shows how the NWO was so cruel in the end of the day, because Wolfpack and Black and White, doesn't matter what you were, you're the NWO.
Right, and yeah, people are still talking about it. Doesn't make it good, but people always say it was the beginning of the end. No, they had already been losing the war since that previous April or so. So they had been losing the ratings for a long time, and the ratings really didn't start slipping big time until the spring.
And then once the major stars were off TV and they were trying to like build up the mid card, and it's very obvious. I think that's when it really.
Well, we haven't even gotten to NWO 2000 or the NWO in WWE, so maybe we'll continue this talk on the radio, but you're going to have to tune in on Tuesdays. Join us next week because we're going to talk about The Rock's career and the best and worst swerves in pro wrestling. So for the panel of...
Hold on, can I stop you for a second? Last time you said that we were going to do best and worst swerves. Yeah. And you ended up swerving the audience. I mean, are we really going to do it this time?
Well, yeah.
I mean, how am I supposed to believe you?
We haven't been here 5 months, and we were supposed to do it like 2 months ago, and you canceled because of a hurricane.
You don't return emails anymore. You don't even have a phone. It's like can't reach you with.
I just don't know what's going on.
I can't text you.
No wonder.
Like, there's reasons why like Lawrence is here, Chris is here. They just feel like they have no confidence in you anymore. I mean, I just don't know what's going on. We've had people like in and out of the show that they are you swerving them? Like, what's going on?
Are you talking like Jay and Orlando and those sort of people?
I'm not swerving them.
There's a reason why they're not here.
I'm not swerving it. Okay, are you saying you have no confidence in me as the host of this Wrestling Roundtable?
Eric, I'm gonna have to. I'm gonna vote.
Fine, let's have a vote then.
That's fine.
I'm voting no confidence.
Eric, as much as you brought me on here and everything, I just vote no confidence.
I just don't know where the future of Wrestling Roundtable is, and I don't know, which side you to believe anymore. I'm sorry,
Brett.
No confidence. Not anymore.
Will.
You know what?
Sorry, bro.
That's right. Let's get the. Come on, Will. We're getting the hell out of here.
I'm sorry.
I'm taking a t-shirt.
Take a t-shirt anyway.
Sorry.
I could sell it.
Well, I guess I'll be here next week. Will you? Please?